Most travelers have never heard of Kamchatka, but beyond the edge of eastern Russia lies a land of active volcanoes, enormous brown bears, steaming valleys, and landscapes so wild that roads simply stop existing. And very few people ever make it this far. What people think Kamchatka is. When people think of Russia, they often imagine Moscow, St. Petersburg, historic cities, and vast forests. But nearly 4,000 miles east lies one of the least visited regions on Earth, the Kamchatka Peninsula. A place larger than many countries, home to hundreds of volcanoes, thousands of rivers. Very few roads connect its landscapes. Many places can only be reached by helicopter. Some cannot be reached at all without serious planning and the right conditions. The infrastructure here was never built for visitors. It was built for survival, for fishing communities and research stations and people who needed to live here, not just pass through. And the deeper you travel into Kamchatka, the more it feels like another world. Not a remote version of somewhere familiar. Something genuinely different. The volcanoes everyone comes to see. For many travelers, Kamchatka begins with volcanoes. And few places on Earth contain so many. More than 300 volcanoes rise across the peninsula. Dozens remain active. Some still erupt. Others release steam from deep beneath the Earth. There are volcanoes here that have been continuously active for longer than most modern cities have existed. The kind of activity that reminds you the planet isn't finished yet. That the surface we walk on is less permanent than it appears. The landscape feels young, unfinished, and constantly changing. That this isn't geology you read about in books. It's geology happening in front of you. And nowhere else in Eurasia feels quite like this. Not the Alps. Not the Caucasus. Not anywhere else on the continent. Kamchatka sits on its own category. A land ruled by bears. One of Kamchatka's most famous residents is the brown bear. The peninsula supports one of the largest populations in the world. The numbers here are significant not just in total, but in density. Bears that have lived with very little human pressure for a very long time. Every summer, salmon return to the rivers, and bears gather along the water. They fish. They feed. They compete for position at the best spots. And they move with a confidence that comes from knowing this landscape belongs to them. The salmon runs here are enormous. The rivers fill. And for the bears, it's the most important period of the year. Everything depends on it. The weight they gain. The winter they'll survive. They prepare for the long winter ahead. Valleys of fire and steam. Beneath the surface, Kamchatka remains incredibly active. Steam rises from the earth. Hot springs bubble through the landscape. And entire valleys release energy from deep below. You can be walking through open ground and feel warmth rising through the soil beneath you. See water that shouldn't be moving the way it's moving. Hear sounds coming from places where nothing should be making sound. The geothermal activity here is constant, and it changes the texture of the entire landscape. The Valley of Geysers is one of the largest geothermal regions on Earth. Columns of steam rise into the air. Boiling water erupts from the ground. On a rhythm. It's one of Kamchatka's greatest wonders, and many travelers never realize it exists. They know about the volcanoes. They've seen pictures of the bears. But the valleys, the steaming, boiling, erupting valleys, those catch people completely off guard. Most people will never visit Kamchatka. But those who do often discover one of the wildest places left on Earth. If you enjoy destinations beyond the obvious, this channel is built for that. The Pacific Coast. Kamchatka sits between the Pacific Ocean and the Sea of Okhotsk. The coastline feels remote, wild, and largely untouched. Black volcanic beaches stretch for miles. The color comes from the rock, from the same volcanic material that built the interior of the peninsula and eventually met the sea. It's a landscape that tells the same story from the mountains to the water lane. Waves crash against lava cliffs, not gradually shaped cliffs. Dramatic, angular, recent-looking cliffs that still look like they were formed quickly and haven't fully settled. And fishing communities sit beside the ocean. Small places, places that exist because the sea provides what they need. The sea has shaped life here for centuries, long before anyone thought of Kamchatka as a destination. long before the word wilderness was used to describe it. And it adds another layer to a landscape already filled with contrasts. Because out here, at the edge of the Pacific, the scale of everything becomes even clearer. The last great wilderness. Much of Kamchatka has no roads, no towns, and no permanent settlements. Some regions remain accessible only by helicopter. Others require days of travel on foot, by river, or across terrain that doesn't move at any pace you can push. The distance between places here isn't just physical. It's felt. It changes how a day moves, how far you can actually get, and what it means to be somewhere remote. This isolation has protected the landscape, not by law alone, but by geography, by the simple fact that it takes a serious effort to reach the places worth protecting. And that has preserved ecosystems that have changed very little. The rivers are clean. The forests are intact. The wildlife populations are healthy. Because the pressure that has reduced those things everywhere else simply never arrived here at the same scale. In an increasingly connected world, places like this are becoming rare. Not just rare to visit, rare to exist. And Kamchatka remains one of the largest wilderness regions left. Silence at the edge of the world. When the sun disappears, Kamchatka becomes even quieter. The wind moves through the valleys. The rivers continue flowing. The kind of clear that feels almost unfamiliar. The kind you only encounter in places far enough from everything that the sky gets to be what it actually is. The silence feels enormous. Not just the absence of noise, but a presence of its own. Something you can feel rather than simply not hear. And the distance from the rest of the world becomes impossible to ignore. You're not just physically far from other places. You're psychologically far. In a way that very few destinations in the modern world can still produce. Why travelers seek places like Kamchatka. Few people travel to Kamchatka by accident. There are no layovers that bring you here. No cruise ships that make it a port of call. No travel deals that include it as a bonus stop. The journey is long. The conditions can be difficult. Weather changes fast. Plans change with it. And the region remains challenging to explore in ways that require real preparation, not just a good attitude. But that's exactly why people come. They're searching for places that still feel undiscovered, for landscapes that haven't been heavily developed, for wildlife that hasn't been shaped by human proximity, and for experiences that feel genuinely wild. Not curated wild, not photographed and packaged wild, actually wild. Kamchatka offers all of that. Who this side of Kamchatka is for. This side of Kamchatka is for travelers who seek wilderness, for people who don't need luxury, who don't need itineraries that run on schedule, who are comfortable with plans changing because the weather decided to, for those who understand that some of the world's greatest destinations aren't easy to reach. They're remote. They're difficult. They ask something of you before they give anything back. And that's exactly what makes them unforgettable. Because the effort becomes part of the experience. The difficulty becomes part of the memory. And the distance from everything else becomes the whole point. Kamchatka isn't simply a remote peninsula. It's volcanoes, bears, geysers, oceans, and landscapes so wild they remind us how much of the natural world once looked like this. And once you stand at the edge of this wilderness, you realize how little of it remains elsewhere, how much has been changed, how much has been developed, and how important it is that places like this still exist, even if most people will never see them. Subscribe for more journeys beyond the tourist version. If you could experience one side of Kamchatka, what would you choose? The volcanoes, the bears, the geysers, or the endless wilderness?